Thank you, Gavin, and thank you to the APM for allowing us to have this presentation this morning. So my background, in case we haven't worked together or we haven't met in the past somehow, I've been 24 plus years in commercial projects on and off. Started at Mott MacDonald on PFI contracts as part of a engineering team supporting them, and that really inspired me. I loved the public projects, the money, making sure we got value for taxpayers, building hospitals, schools, libraries, oil rigs and energy projects, what have you. Qualified into law and really got into IT projects at Essex County Council about 12 years ago, and that was my real introduction to buying ICT and helping model the contracts. And from then on, it's really gone from amazing projects, but obviously the risks have changed as time has moved on. And Innovate Law, which I think is the next slide, if I can, oh, hang on, I'm not on, have I got control, Gavin?
I believe so. Let me move that on for you.
Might have gone into a different window on the screen. Yeah, thanks. If you could do that. Yeah. So Innovate Law was just a natural evolution for my career, actually, in the sense of I wanted to join dots between law and technology. I wanted to learn more about the gaps and the risks as to what was going on. And Innovate Law gave me an opportunity to just look at how to innovate, to protect businesses, number one, improve those processes, number two, and grow. So we've got all different types of emerging technologies and online marketing, but the risk is spreading all the time. And, you know, from a legal perspective, trying to protect our clients and keep up with what's going on in the internet. You know, you have to work really in industry. So that's what I've done for the last, say, seven years with Innovate Law, last 3.5 years, just really embedded into technology industry. And it's all come down to me to protect to start with. I started kind of looking at process and grow, thinking protect was a developed area. You know, it's such a big spend area. But actually, I fell in love with the fact that protect it desperately needs help to kind of sharpen it up and help the buyers understand what it is they're buying, and how do we make sure on these complex projects, critical national infrastructure, for example, you know, we are actually developing a cyber resilient model in the contracts themselves. And as we're bringing in third parties at all times, there is a process in the contracts to help manage security and digital / online internet risk. Do you want to move on? Just in case I can't.
Yep.
Thank you. This is an acknowledgement to Neil Linford-Ralph, who he's an ex-McKinsey consultant who became an SME in terms of small business, but he's advising well, and I just wanted to acknowledge him on this deck for doing the slides for this. Neil's business, just to let you know, it just helps businesses understand their purpose, which sounds obvious, but actually it's quite difficult sometimes, and to understand for businesses to understand the value they deliver to their clients, and to make sure that those businesses deliver their creative vision into a successful product service. And he helps me with Innovate with that. So I just wanted to give him an acknowledgement for the deck, because he kindly did that. If we could move on, please. Right, so getting straight to the heart of the In It For We, which is part of the title of the talk today. So when I met Mark, we were both sitting in a Tech UK, it was cyber resilience governance for non-technical directors, leaders, and it's all part of the government's initiative, obviously, to build cyber resilience out into the non-technical parts of businesses, which is extremely important, and I completely support that. But having had that experience of buying information communications technology with lots of big data, etc., I wanted to test the fact that there are so many gaps in terms of roles and responsibilities, and I have actually challenged a bit as to how are we writing security requirements in our technology projects for customers buying in suppliers and primes, and then how are primes managing that cyber resilience risk as part of their service delivery under those big contracts. So what this is a model that I was introduced to from the transport industry, the rail industry, and how they build major rail projects. And I just thought, why don't we think like this in technology more? Technology contracts tend to be arm's length, service provision, low risk, but the irony is they're not low risk, they're actually always high risk projects. And the easiest way to reduce the risk in theory is to outsource everything, which it may be low risk in terms of doing things for the customer, but actually you're losing control at all times. And then you're not actually, there's a real confusion as to who's responsible for the security, but the duty of care, especially in the public sector, will always be on the authority to protect the individuals, the data, the money, the everything. So what I thought about this model, it's the vested interest model, applying it to cyber resilience. So what we do is draft a suite of contracts that actually support either at organisational level or at project level. There's a shared vision, so that everybody joining into that project has got security at the heart of what it is they're bringing into the project. Because without security, the project is undermined, unfortunately. Now, I've got a shared vision quote here, which could be used. So together we proactively create optimal conditions for the future way of cyber resilience. Our modern partnership creates common values and success through innovative and sustainable solutions. Selling cyber resilience is a benefit for the business, okay? And that's really important because if you're actually sort of putting cyber resilience in as part of the solution, and it's not just to meet a standard or a requirement of a certificate, what we're saying here is we can actually really prove that our organisation, hits a certain quality of what we do with cyber resilience. We can prove it, but we do this because all these big primes, you're littered with. I don't mean littered as in a bad word, but I mean there's SMEs and experts and small businesses all over the delivery of many projects, and on the face of it, that looks like a real governance nightmare. And everyone's going to say, well, we meet ISO X, we've got cyber essentials, plus what have you. In a way, that's all been practiced. What we're asking for here is another level of what really does cyber resilience actually mean. It's not it cannot be a tick box exercise. You can have a lifeguard watching the kids in the swimming pool. Now he's either a good lifeguard and he saves kids, or he is a lifeguard and he just sits by the swimming pool, okay, on his phone. And this is what we're talking about. It's the quality of that cyber resilience now, and the proof, the real time. Are you secure? Are you resilient? And what that means is it's not not everything has to be at top cyber resilience level. It's just making sure where that cyber resilience does have to be up to a top level, that everybody, the way you've set out and governed that project, that top information, that top data, those top assets are being well managed and looked after. That's where the priority resource is in your cyber resilience model. So just looking at this map, for example, so we start off on the top line, identifying, the mix of prime and SME. And what the In It for We does is it balances the roles and responsibilities. It's outcomes based, so stemming from the vision of having cyber resilience, you then build, as you would with any contract, ideally, the requirements. But on top of those requirements, you've got the outcomes, you've got the way you're going to measure it. The way we're going to remedy it when there's an issue. But people talk about the business continuity. That's all fine, but many contracts I've seen are either very poorly drafted because nobody's really dealt with the schedules properly, or they haven't really understood what the ask is. So what I'm trying to say here is we're closing the gap on, they must be looking after their threat landscape, or they must be looking after their threat landscape, or they're using X, so it must be fine. This is what I'm trying to say.
Might I interject and try to state this in a short form manner for the audience, perhaps?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Test whether this message carries the framework's idea. So we're already in a world where it is clear large projects especially, but even the smaller projects experience increased complexity and interconnectivity. There is an evolving threat landscape where it doesn't matter where in your supply chain or your internal processes you've got your security, they all pretty much are exposed to a large number of complicated threats. And some of those threats could be realized with very high negative impact. So I think what this is, in a nutshell, is a framework that's an approach to ensure that we do not undertake activities that are siloed contractually or philosophically. We're trying to make sure that the governance structure of any delivered project is tied to a singular objective and a singular mission, which you rightly said necessarily includes the security. Have I captured pretty much what framework is meant to be?
Yeah.
If I've captured it right, can I ask, from your experience, what's the most typical style of contractual arrangements in procurement and supply chains? Where are the gaps? What is it that's not done that this framework is covering?
Yeah. So and you've just reminded me. So one of the key issues for me is whether so cyber resilience applies to all industries. Number one point. Yeah. So each industry may have some sort of standard forms of contracts that they use. So construction will have FIDIC, NEC, JCT, what have you. What we're talking about is we're not necessarily talking. Cyber resilience doesn't just apply to ICT contracts, is my point. It applies to everything that organisation is buying. So, and in technology, whilst the contracts are becoming so modelled that they're losing their risk analysis when they're being drafted, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so you're just putting a model contract out to buy really quite complex cloud services or something, and you haven't had the right advice or the expertise to really understand what the risk and the harm and the liability and anyway, going back. So if you think about, let's go to the nuclear power station. Oh, Gavin, sorry, can you move to the next? This is really interesting. So if you imagine a nuclear energy plant, it's going to have everything in it. It's going to have construction contracts, it's going to have transport contracts, it's going to have energy type contracts, chemical type, health and safety, telecommunications, everything. And that's all there. Buildings, customers, physical security, distribution, production, ICT, transport. Okay, there's probably a load of stuff missing. This is just an example. Those cyber attacks can come in at any level of any of those contracts, any of those relationships. And there are gaps because nothing is laid out enough to make it an in it for we. So your distribution contracts could be hitting on your ICT technology, yeah, and all over there is a whole matrix of vulnerability that isn't being closed at the moment because there's no real framework in which to capture that. And for some business owners or CEOs, that could look like quite a scary project.
Yeah.
My challenge is it isn't. Yeah, we can do this.
So would it be right to say that the governance approach actually takes us away from just being reactive with vanilla templates of contracts to creating a proactive community as well as having a stronger set of contractual agreements across this chain?
I would say governance is a fifth of the solution. Yeah. So I can't remember. Oh yeah. So the next slides, please, Gavin. Yeah. So this is why this is important. How do we build it? How do we write the requirement? So, education, that education is going to have to be bespoke to whatever level that people are at, what their expertise is, but they still need to understand that there is some role for them in that cyber resilience, in it for we vested interest model. And the vested interest model will be governed overall by, say, a master contract that is owned by the customer, ideally. And then below that are then all the different, that's the kind of people are contractually bound, but they've understood why they are. And the better at cyber resilience you are on those projects and how you can make sure you can prove that, the more successful you're going to be moving into a more cyber resilient way of working, because this is offering a competitive edge really in bids, ideally. So education is massive, and this doesn't just sit in a technical silo. Consultancy is a great opportunity to advise or receive consultancy in the right way for cyber resilience. There's a lot of whitewash out there. There's a lot of people who are experts. There are a lot of people who are not experts. And it doesn't have the, let's say, chartered approach that the other professions seem to have at the moment. So maybe that's an improvement and maybe that's an APM consideration or something going forward. But the consultancy piece is important, but it's understanding some transparency behind what is the consultancy, because you've got technical and non-technical. And then you've got managed service. So of course you're going to be buying some sort of service for cyber resilience, probably more technical, but what is it you're actually going to buy? Because in my mind, there are mandatory requirements for technical, and then there's non-mandatory, which may give you maybe give you some layers of extra security, but you've got to do the basics. And actually, Mark, the reason why I approached you at that cyber resilience talk at Tech UK was because you spoke about cyber hygiene.
Yes.
Okay, let's start at number one.
Yes, absolutely. So, to that particular point, cyber hygiene, as I understand it and I interpret it, is all about making sure that the end-to-end system, which most people are not invested in considering, because you've got a business to run. You're only looking at one aspect. You want to protect your business. But cyber hygiene is about making sure that the extended effect of a breach elsewhere in the chain that affects your business doesn't have a ripple that causes unintended consequences for you. Now, the only way to do so is to actually have a singular common understanding of where the protective measures are put in place, so that the bare minimum of services or assets are functioning even under the most serious of breaches, so that you can continue to effectively provide your service, keep your business alive, achieve the next step, which would be ultimately to repair or redirect from the attack.
What you're describing there is exactly the way the vested model should work, so that everybody knows their role and responsibility at a certain trigger point or what have you. Who kicks in where, who takes responsibility for what, who's doing the root cause analysis, who's picking up the liability, the harm, the remedial action, you know. And that's kind of that is what resilience is for me. It's we understand, we're clear, it's not a panic, it's just we know what we're doing. It's the governance layer, okay, and that the governance, that is governance of an organisation / governance of the project / governance of the contracts. So there's complexity behind all of these simple circles that needs to go into more detail, because not everybody needs to know everything. It's got to be set up so that you know what you need to know, and you do what you need to do, and that is ring fenced, and that's fine. Okay, you don't do that, well, you know, that's not doing a job properly, type thing. Legal action is so important. This is the whip behind the, you know, failures. You can't. The whole idea of negligence is to protect those that are harmed because of negligence, for example, and you know, organisations pay so much not to be liable rather than do the job properly and not cause harm. I can't even explain that in more detail. That's it in the nutshell. But you know, we're not living in an ideal world. I accept that, but the risks are so big. And as an SME on a major project, you do not want to be held liable for a cybercrime when it's not you, and that is happening a lot, okay? Because everybody's seeing that the SME is the risk on the project. Let's look at the prime, okay? Just as an example, but it's all two-way, three-way, four-way. No one's better than anyone on this at the moment, as far as I can tell. Next slide, please, Gavin. So, you know, it has to come back down to basics, and you know, we've gone through my proposal in terms of how I think cyber resilience can be built on some of the biggest and most important sites, infrastructure projects for the UK, and how that brings in everybody in a way that is manageable, affordable, sustainable, prioritised, and what each individual organisation or customer buying needs to really, do you understand what a cyber harms model is, you know? So in the real world, if you've got slates coming off of your dodgy roof, you know, you can see the size of the risk is where those slates are going to fall. Okay, don't park your car under where the slates are going to fall. Okay, that's fine. I can't afford to do the roof, but I'm not going to put my car right under where it's going to get smashed. Now, we've got to do the same for cyber harms modelling. So if we know that there is a, we've understood that there is a set of there's a not manned area of the internet with internet assets on, or legacy systems that are not looked after. Well, how are we going to make that as low risk as possible? Do you chop it off and out of the business as soon as possible, or do you let it run and still let it hold data? I mean, it's just obvious, but who's doing the cyber harms risk model across the whole entire threat landscape of what it is that project is, or what how that organisation is running, or that department? And I genuinely can't see how everyone understands that, because this is complex, and this is, again, it feeds into education as the number one starting point. The second piece here is prioritising your assets that need protection. So that again, a very big subject. I did some work through the APM with the pharmaceutical industry. That was around, once a product getting to market is against the odds. So once you've got that product on market, how do you protect all the IP and everything that got it there? Got to make sure it's on resilient infrastructure. People can't just copy it, which and if it's that valuable, you invest to make sure that is manned and protected. It's not just a tick box. It's you have a security guard in front of the bar all night. Maybe you have 3 at the end of the night, but the point is you do what you have to do as the risk goes up and down. Exactly the same here. Strength, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and that's a really important exercise for most things. But who is running your SWOTs for the entire organisation on its digital risk management, cyber resilience? Where are your weaknesses? Culture change. Mark, I think you might want to say something to that.
Sure, and I probably will refer back to this later on anyway. But ultimately, I think I've been searching for the snappiest way to describe what we're looking for. And remember, if we're to the audience, if we're thinking about large projects or portfolios of projects, the important thing is we're trying to align everybody who's involved, all the, in business speak, stakeholders, to protect against cyber threats. We're trying to encourage shared responsibility. We're trying to ensure that any investments made into the project or supporting the project, I'll just use the term project to encompass everything I've said before, are robust. And there's also, finally, an effective means of sharing information. That's also a cultural aspect, because organizations don't naturally share information easily. Ultimately, the aim, the North Star, is to enhance the resilience and the integrity of these complex interconnected systems of people and legal entities who are trying to achieve a particular activity. That culture change is a very, very difficult one. We're very parochial in the way we behave, and we're talking about something that actually, if you were a prime, you were trying to push it down through your supply chain. If you are a member of the supply chain, you're trying to get your peers, your suppliers, and your customer chain to behave in an appropriate manner. It's not trivial.
And just chipping in there, we've had a couple of questions and comments coming in on the questions here. Some of them are comments, but there is one question here that relates to suppliers. So how important is blockchain and similar technologies improving cyber resilience for SMEs contracting to external suppliers? I'm not sure if you want to pick that one up, Sophie or Mark.
I don't mind saying what I know about it, but this is part of for me as a professional feeding into these contracts and projects. what we need to understand about blockchain, again, are its weaknesses. And what I've understood is a lot of investment has gone into blockchain, and this is just such a really good example of. But then the experts on internet asset and domain name security can see that they're just putting really invested blockchain technology on top of internet assets that haven't got integrity, because nobody's looking after the foundations as to what that blockchain is being put on, because it all rests on the internet. So that's kind of the cyber hygiene point. Again, we're just going to always come back down to you're only as secure as the foundations you're building your blockchain on.
So that's definitely a managerial technical perspective. I'll take it a step back, if that's all right. So yes, blockchain's a reasonable tool to consider. So I'll talk through the pros of it and then the cons of it from someone who's had to implement it for contract management in the past. It's definitely good. It's more enhancing or security enhancing than not. It's definitely able to provide through public ledgers sort of auditability, so therefore it can be transparent, it can be trustworthy if well implemented. The architecture does need to be clear, and that's to Sophie's point. It's only as good as the ground it's built on. It can be reasonably efficient. It's not very fast, but it can be reasonably efficient. It's a voting system in the end, and therefore it might actually unburden some costs and also increase accuracy. But I will say that the downside of it is it takes an awfully long time to first get it into a manner where you can start using it. There's a huge technical learning curve involved. There's also an initial setup, non-recurring investment that you have to put in that is not trivial. And as we're building on internet infrastructure, if it isn't in a walled garden, as if it isn't in your own little domain where you are controlling things, it has to evolve as the internet evolves, because the internet is a wild thing. It's a set of wild horses, and you're trying to balance yourself on them, and they decide to change direction every so often. There's also a major lack of clarity in the regulatory area. It's getting better. Legal recognition of this, of anything that's built on blockchain, it's not just financial transactions. If you try to make it into a contractual mechanism, which jurisdiction actually accepts that?
Yeah.
And then the last bit of it is, of course, coupled to that is how do you ensure things stay private? It's not trivial.
And we've had some additional comments stating. Sorry, go on, Sophie.
Sorry, just to that question though, that question, it could be, the same question could apply to any of the emerging technologies, and all of that feeds in exactly why we're having this conversation, because, let's get to the risk register. We're not going to, I don't know if that's time to finish. The risk register, I mean, that's exactly where, there's that, that kind of committee or forum or oversight as to, the blockchain isn't the solution. The blockchain has just got to be managed like everything else, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I will say on that essentially what we're doing here is we're flagging a call to arms. There's a problem, and I hope I've got the time to go into that. I know it's only 3 minutes, but the call to arms, we think it is needed, and that we hope to convince you. So you've seen the framework. You've seen the ideas behind it, or at least what we think is motivating it. All right. Firstly, who am I? I'm a technologist. I'm not coming from the legal aspect of things. I'm actually a lead on the space business in the UK for Capgemini. I'm in the consultancy branch, and I've spent most of my time in the space business, both this side of the Atlantic and the other side, where there's a lot of activity. And the implication of this is that I've been involved in a lot of very, very large projects, some mega projects which have got supply chains that stretch around the world. One of the most complex ones I had under my wing involved countries that were numbering in the over 120, so suppliers from those countries, and it made it quite an interesting juggling act to be able to ensure that the right types of behaviors to be able to achieve a large project were put in place and not crazily overspend. All large projects risk that. Some of the overspend is justified, and some of it isn't. Mostly this was to try and stop the stuff that wasn't justified. My contact details are there. Anyway, I'll go on to the next slide. Let's see if I can do that. I'm trying, I've double clicked. Okay, so what has changed? So I'm pulling us back a little bit. What's our context? We're in a globally connected world. The internet has changed a lot of things. Our instantaneous communications are incredible. But the way we evolved was from the 70s and 80s to small, I'm going to continue to call them walled gardens. They weren't necessarily walled, it was just they were limited networks. Then we moved through the 90s, 2000s, the internet started to really explode, and services started to go across it. The internet was designed by academics and people within the defense organizations who were simply interested in exchanging scientific information. It wasn't built for finance. It wasn't built for contracts. It wasn't built to be secure. So now we're starting to see that it needs to be. So unsurprisingly, today's systems are brittle, they're reliant on a single dimension of protection, stop somebody from coming in. Because once you're inside the building, you can do whatever you want. So naturally, with that sort of philosophy, cyber breaches are going to be commonplace. And nowadays, we actually have to think that they're going to be inevitable. So let's stop thinking about blocking people from coming into the castle. Let's start thinking about how we protect ourselves so that there's a level of resilience. Okay, I'm going to jump over in the interest of time to the next slide. So we've got three concepts: cyber security, which is to harden the target, whatever target there is. Now, contractually, if you follow standards out there, that's quite a lot of requirements to deal with. It's a huge amount of activity goes in there. And quite rightly, many companies decide to hive that off to a specialist function. Now let's bring in the idea of operational resilience. If you are in a building and it gets damaged, you want people to be able to still move up and down in the building. So there's fire escapes. There's a resilient the way to change floors and to get out of the building. Well, IT resilience needs to actually adopt that. It needs to be able to adapt and recover from disruptions. Does it do so? It's a little bit debatable. You want your business to continue. You want disaster recovery. You want crisis management tools in place. Do we have all of those? Is it unified? Well, I've got a lot to say about that, but I'll just take the philosophy and I'll now merge the two. Cybersecurity and operational resilience blend together. It makes makes our targets within our businesses, our activities, resilient. That's the theory behind it. And if you actually did an analysis on this in terms of just systems requirements, if you found an organization's DNA, what it really, really needs to keep going, I don't know, somehow delivering ice cream for no matter what over the internet, you actually take the 1200 control requirements and knock it down to around about 300, perhaps even 250. So you are making the level of requirement compliance lower, but these have to be very, very carefully controlled, and they have to be precise with respect to what you are trying to do. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And so, hang on, this doesn't seem right. Okay, so if we assume that your business ecosystem is always going to have a breach, it doesn't matter, because people are clever. People are always curious. People are going to do something. People have different motivations. So it's a business risk. So to Sophie's point, it needs to be managed like any other. Don't just put it to your CISO. It's part of your entire way of being. It's not just the cybersecurity department, and it's got to be developed by leadership. It's got to acknowledge that you're going to have breaches, so you need to know what your fallback positions are. You also need to understand, therefore, your day-to-day operational basis. And it's not just your enterprise, it'll be the suppliers tied into the project that you're committed to deliver. And potentially your customers as well. So it's got to form the basis of enabling business outcomes. So what we're trying to do with this is, from a technical viewpoint, you want to bring together system security engineering and risk management frameworks. And there's those two communities that speak different languages, bring them together.
Yeah.
And you allow cyber attack risks to be managed. I realize we're really short on time, so I'm just going to raise this example. You will, I think, have heard of the Post Office Horizon scandal. If you look at it, the 5 bullet points that are on here, you'll actually see that a lot of the problem was simply failure to manage the cyber resilience, because the concept didn't even exist for the community here that was involved. Ethical partnerships with vested interests, drawing your eye to the observation point, ethical partnerships with vested interests that are all pointing in the same direction, everyone's pointing in the same direction, that's where success is created. If you are trying to hide things, obviously bad behavior. If you're blinded by technical complexity, then come on, who isn't? I'm a technologist and I can't work 50% of the stuff out there. Organizational culture makes it even worse, because then it's, well, I don't know, I'm not responsible, neither is Joe, neither is Sally, that's a major issue. And who actually knows the ground truth of the information? What's the language you use? And what's the auditability pathway that you've employed to make sure that everything is up to scratch? We're going to take shortcuts, aren't we? We're in business, in our daily lives, we take shortcuts. So how do we make sure we don't take the wrong types of shortcuts? I'll stop there.
I just want to add to that, Mark, finally, is we all saw the harms caused. Post office scandal, yeah?
Yes, we did. And so therefore it hits more than just business, it hits people's lives. And it literally ended lives, which is the worst bit about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's go to the last poll. We'll quickly just move on with this one. So I won't keep it open too long. Hopefully you can see it on your screens here. So is cyber resilience incorporated into your organisation's vision, value, strategies and decision-making process? I think this is a very valuable one. And then when we close this, we've got a couple of minutes where we can go to questions. I can see in the questions box that there's quite a few comments, a couple of direct questions and a few experiences, which is interesting. So currently 57% yes, 21% no, and then another 21%, we've moved up to 60% yes, so that's encouraging. 80% of people who voted. That's encouraging, I think, to see. I'm going to close that one off now. So, yeah, 60% yes, 90% no, and 19% unsure. I think it's still encouraging, but for me, that still means that there's still work to be done. What are your views on that, guys?
Oh, Sophie, you want to go first?
Thank you. What does cyber resilience mean? Because we do not have a definition of it, and maybe there isn't one, but in my mind, we're all answering what could be a different question.
Yeah, my take on it is, and that question was deliberately framed with the terminology that we were using in this presentation. So thank you for taking the time to listen to us, to hear that. But you will have your own view on cyber resilience. Please don't mix up cybersecurity, which is building basically a great big castle wall around your assets in your enterprise, with cyber resilience, which is more about protecting the core functions that you need to just keep going even under duress. Because if you build a wall around everything, your wall will be breached. It will happen. So are you able to manage and recover that? And are you able to manage and recover that in all circumstances that are important to you, and deliver the projects that you're signed up to, or the business as usual operations that you're signed up to? If it is 60%, it is encouraging, absolutely. Does that mean you can rest on your laurels? I'd suggest no.
No.
Have a look at it.
Well, I've got a question here which is raised by one of our chartered members here. I remember 35 years knowing someone who worked in the tech security for government, not in the UK, and he said that you can only ever slow the breaches but never ever stop the hackers, as they always win. And would you say this is only blossomed now with technical revolution and possibly AI for all of its benefits? And may think of new breaches. I mean, that's food for thought, isn't it? And think of new benefits and new breaches and ways that machines thinking up breaches for humans. I mean, that's certainly food for thought. What do you think to that?
So I'll go in from the technical side, if that's all right, first. So technically, absolutely. The technical language that's used amongst planners in this area is that the threat surface has only increased, and it's increased as the volume, in proportion to the volume that is increasing of stuff that's connected. Now, so a breach needs to have an impact. So in some cases, a breach can be just tolerated. It's the management of the risk of those breaches that is becoming more important. In the past, your whole viewpoint was to ensure that you didn't get a breach, and if something was breached, if somebody just snooped around and took things and garnered insight without touching anything, you wouldn't necessarily have to enact a backup system because nothing was deleted, or nothing was trapped, or nothing was, ransomwared. Nowadays, I would suggest that you'd even have to think about what is your remedial action if someone is just snooping around to gain insight. Maybe classical spying. They're not actually deleting anything. They're not moving anything, but obviously they'll leave some kind of trail because it's digital, isn't it? So there's that side of it. And the other side of it is, are there more ways to get in? Are there more ways to attack? Yes, absolutely. In fact, just yesterday I was talking to somebody about a particular new side channel attack that had been experienced, and that the company I work for is actively looking at ways to block. So yeah, it's definitely been it's a very lively area.
Also, we can, from a sort of normal real world perspective, when you're seeing huge volumes of data being targeted and stolen from big companies, what is happening to that data? I mean, that data is it's landing in serious organised crime. So those whatever it is that's been stolen, whether it's phone numbers, children's ID, Ministry of Defence personnel data, that the harm hasn't stopped. Maybe for the company and their activity of what they've got to do is one thing, but the harm continues for however long after, and these poor individuals or people or numbers that are getting premium SMS texts because they can get charged through. I mean, there's some of the world has made it so easy to make money off cybercrime, so everybody feeds, and it's really understanding the bigger landscape as to why that demand is there. The crime will continue so long as the demand for it is there, and I'm not sure all the agencies outside of our organisations and projects are as tied up. You know, there's huge resource required to manage, and the whole thing needs tackling in a way that I'm not sure where that conversation is sitting right now. I think in the big global governance, there's so much going on. It's making it very difficult to tackle these huge problems.
Yeah,
And maybe to that point, it's all about. I like using this analogy. The meal is elephant size. What we need to do is eat the elephant in very small chunks.
Yes, exactly. And this is the starting point. Well, not the starting point, but the next steps.
Yeah. And I think that's a great analogy to wrap things up on. There are a couple of comments in the chat there. I'm just conscious of time though, so I'm going to put the chat details or the contact information up on the screen there. If you want to follow up, ask any of our panelists any questions directly, please do get in contact with them there. There is also, I'll send out a feedback survey. I'll deliberately keep it very short. We don't need to know everyone's inside leg measurement, but purely, getting your views on this topic and what the interest levels are. And it certainly is an interesting, fascinating and forever evolving topic. So I'll be sure to share that afterwards. Sophie, Mark, just want to say a huge thank you to both of you. I don't know if there's anything, just final remarks you want to add at all?
I'll go first and then let Sophie have the very last word.
Okay.
Firstly, to everyone who's attended, thank you for taking your time to listen to us. I think this is a really important area, and it's basically a philosophical change that I have to say I'm probably not in agreement with the 60% of you who said that cyber resilience is in play and working well. I get an anecdotal feeling that we're probably a little bit behind the curve. But if you just listen to our message, contemplate, think about it, see if there are things that you can do. It doesn't have to be a big spend. We just want to slowly shift the conversation and the intent towards something that's more secure for all of us. Sophie?
Well, I went to a supplier defence talk a couple of weeks ago, and one of the retired MOD generals said that even defence were looking at the civilian population world of business for their cyber resilience solutions, acknowledging that cyber war is a huge part of the next steps. Well, it is. I mean, but this isn't just a business issue. This is a national security, public defence, lives. It does not end, and I just want to know, when are we going to stop talking and start, walking?
Fantastic. A lovely way to end up. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Mark, Sophie. This conversation will certainly roll on and continue, so I'm sure we'll be back with further updates. But thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.